Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Coachable Moments. I am your host, Pat GPT, and this is going to be my favorite episode, my personal favorite episode, because I'm going to share a lot about my story with you all, with the hopes that it adds some hope and some faith to your walk. It took me a while to get to the point to where I could talk about, my past, but um, I realized that my darkness can be someone else's light. And many people across the country are going through some really dark moments, as I was. And I would just wanted to take some time to share with you how I got out of it and some of the things that transpired during that time. So the title of this recording will be Your Back is Against the Wall. And this is without a doubt one of the most sensitive topics that I've lived through personally. And, a lot of people look at me and they may not even be aware of, you know, all of the things that I'm going to share during this episode. It's probably going to be one of my longest episodes, too. So, get you some popcorn, get comfortable, and let's get started. So, when your back is against the wall, uh, I want to talk with you about, and I'll go back about 12, 13 years ago, and I'll share with you one of the darkest moments that I can ever remember going through. And I say darkest moments, but it ended up being the highlight of my life. And I really hope that you guys can receive this and find some value in it. So, about 13 years ago, I had found myself at the what I call my valley moment. And through some actions of my own and some actions that were not my fault, I found myself in this particular predicament. I was working at a job that was very secure. I had no worries about money. I had the houses, the land, the cars, my savings account and my checking account uh, was amazing at the time. It was so good that I could go and buy anything that I wanted and just swipe my card and not even worry about it. Life was really good for me. Um, and it all changed as a result of some decisions, some actions, some of my own and some not of my own. But nonetheless, I found myself in a really dark place. Um, I was going through a divorce and, um, you know, uh, just everything that I was familiar with changed. I I was in a very very beautiful home. I, I had like 26 acres of land that I was living on. I had the freedom to go and come as I please in my own space. And after going through that divorce, just imagine having everything taken from you. Everything was taken from me for the most part. Um, I lost the houses. I had three, four houses at the time, nice vehicles. I had going through the divorce. One of the things that a lot of people do, we want to do some things to make us feel better while we're going through that rough time. So I went and purchased myself a brand new truck. Had a Chevy Silverado extended cab, and for a moment, it brought a lot of pleasure, a lot of joy to my life because I love my truck. And I was working in a very secure job at the time, and I ended up losing my job as a result of that. Going through the divorce because I was mentally not present most of the time, and the job that I was working was very dangerous. I didn't need to be doing the job at that time, and God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. He removed me from that job. It was very painful to me at the time because the money was really good. So. Uh, Fast forward, I lose my job, and quickly you start going through money. You're spending more than you make because you're not making anything. And I started to get behind on everything. Divorce is very traumatic financially, and bills started to get behind. And I kid you not, the things that I was trying to hold on to, I felt them sliding out of my grip, and I couldn't hold on to it. Again, I love my truck because it was kind of like my escape place where I could just get in that truck and drive, and it would take my mind off of everything. And once you get a couple payments behind, though, every vehicle that comes by sounds like a tow truck. I mean, I was having those repo dreams. I was sitting there at night. I'd wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because I heard a loud vehicle coming through, and I was thinking that they were coming to repo my truck. That's how on edge I was at the time. And um, and eventually that did happen. Uh, OnStar is real. So if you think you can hide the car or the truck, you can't. So I ended up losing my truck and lost all of the houses. And I ended up staying in this house that it had been abandoned for a long time. And it had no windows in it. And um, I stayed in this house for 2 winters. And it would be so cold in that house that I literally thought I was going to die in my sleep. I just felt like I was going to freeze to death. I had no doubt about it. And at the time, I was sleeping on just a mattress that was laying on the floor in this empty house. And again, the house had been abandoned so long, it was in really bad shape. So I would lay down on that mattress, and I could hear the rats, crawling around my head as I tried to sleep. And I was so worried. I was like, am I going to freeze to death, or am I going to be eaten by rats in my sleep? It was just so uncomfortable. Um, but um, that was where I was at the time, trying to figure out how I was going to take my next shower. It was a really dark time for me. And I did have some people that came through for me, and they would drop food off because they were familiar with the situation that I was going through. And to this day, I'm completely thankful for those people. Um, and so living in that house for 2 winters, it was kind of like my separation moment from life and from what I was going through, and even from the goals that I had for myself, because I couldn't really do anything for myself. I was just at the mercy of Mother Nature and God Himself. And all I had was my faith, and my faith was getting weak. I mean, I went from uh, living like the Jeffersons on the Upper East Side to living in an abandoned house with the rats and the roaches. And you know, I would often question, how did I get here? And why is God allowing me to go through this? And the defining moment in all of this for me was one weekend. It was my weekend to have my kids, my two boys. And I remember, because me and their mother were at odds. Looking back on it, she didn't care. It was her weekend, and she needed a break, and I just need to figure it out. Whether I take the boys to my parents or my sister's house and just make it work for that weekend. But that was not her concern. So I remember it clear as day. She pulled up in the yard and dropped the boys off, and um, it was cold, and I was, as a man, I felt at my lowest point. I felt so broken because here I am, these two little boys are expecting me to be their protector, their provider, their hero. And I was at my lowest moment. I couldn't even think about being a hero to myself. And I remember trying to give the boys a bath in that house, and it was so unsuitable. And, you know, I remember one time particularly, it was an old shower in the house. It was an old bathtub, and it was all rusted out. And I got the boys, and I said, let's go get a bath. And um, my son was like, "Ew, I'm not getting in that." And of course, they ended up, me being the parent, I had to flex. Yeah, you're getting in it, or you're gonna, get a whooping or whatever. So they got in the tub, and I gave them the bath. But even during that, I felt so low. I felt really, really bad. And after they got out, I took them in the room, and we were sitting on the mattress, and my younger son said to me, he said, "Dad, I don't care if you're homeless on the street." He said, "We're still going to come and stay with you." That gave me so much motivation and energy to dig deep within myself and pull myself out of this place that I was in, and trust that God was going to give me what I needed to get my life back on track. Um, the crazy thing about going through that time was, like, I had nothing. I had no food. I didn't know how I was going to eat most of the time. So I was fasting, uh, you know, by default. It wasn't my option to fast, but since I didn't have food, I couldn't eat. So I was literally being stripped of everything, which was like that purifying process that we all go through at times. Mine may seem a little bit more extreme than others, but this is the process that I was going through at the time. And mentally, I was so clear. I was so in tune because I didn't have the distractions. I didn't have the impurities in my body from the food. It was just me, that empty house, and uh, God's voice. And that's all I needed. I realized that what I was going through at the time wasn't as bad as I thought it. I mean, because it really was a blessing looking back on it. So, fast forward several years later, um, I ended up going to my parents' house. If you recall, I shared with you guys on an earlier episode that that's the place that I go to uh, that I can find peace. So I was there at their house one day, and I was looking at the closet. In the closet, there were two things that, through the process of me losing everything, I had taken to their house for storage. And recall now that I told you guys earlier that I lost everything. I lost the house, the vehicles, the land, the money, the job, everything. I still had God, which is all I needed, and I still had the relationship with my boys from that marriage, which is, again, the other thing that I needed, because to this day they're still a blessing to me. Now, the two other items that I had from that divorce were a chair. It was a metal chair that I got, it was a company chair from the job that I lost. Um, I took that chair home, um, and I ended up taking that to my mother's house. The other thing that I had from the divorce, which was the only other thing that I had, was this giant mirror. And it never dawned on me why those were the only things that I had from that marriage until I matured spiritually enough. And I look back on that, and it was a spiritual gift that I was allowed to keep, because I was going to need that for future purposes. And I realized that the purpose of that was for me to sit down and look at myself. And when I started doing that, I realized that all future problems, I can't blame on somebody else. I've got to look at myself, and I've got to say, what did I contribute to that going wrong? And you look back at all the things that you've gone through in life, and they seem like such dark moments, but it was God just really being in the midst, giving me some tools that I was going to need later on in life, that would require me to look at myself. And oftentimes, the things that you go through are just opportunities for you to look at yourself. And not simply from the standpoint of looking at what you did wrong, but you need to look at yourself to realize who you are. You know, um, I heard my pastor say that, we're made in God's image, and we can mentally get so low that we forget how powerful we are. And one of the things that I realized with that chair and that mirror was that sometimes you got to stop, sit down, and take a look at yourself and realize who you are and whose you are. Because you already have everything you need to get through this life and to have a great life. Um, but you've got to intentionally pay attention to what you have and who you are and what's being said to you in a higher level than just my voice. You'll have those spiritual deposits in your brain if you pay attention to it. And that was one of the biggest ones for me, is just realizing that even though I was going through all of that stuff, God gave me a chair and a mirror, not only for me to reflect on what I did wrong, but to also reflect on who I am. And looking back at that moment, it was so dark, but out of that moment came so many blessings that I continue to enjoy today. My relationship with my two sons is amazing. I love them with every fiber of my being. It's nothing that I wouldn't do for them. And, when I look back, not having anyone that I could physically touch at the moment, I felt like if I could just get to my parents' house, or if I could get to my sister's house, I could seek that as a place of refuge. But he gave me two sons that provided so much comfort and so much joy that I was able to make it through. Um, all of the bedtime stories that I told them, I remember to this day. They remember to this day, and it was such a blessing for me to get to that point, to go through that and realize that at my lowest moment, if you lose everything, you still have God, and that's really all that you need. And he reminded me of that during this process. Uh, before I lost the truck. Uh, One of my favorite pastors was preaching a revival, and I didn't have the money to go, but I scraped the money up and I said I'm going to hear him preach, because he is like he's so important and incredible to me that I wanted to just go be in the presence. And during the service, he said something to me that was so profound that I remember it vividly to this day. And he said that if you lose everything, don't lose your mind, because you're going to need it when God restores you. And that word, if I didn't hear anything else that night, it was meant for me to hear that, uh, because going through all of that, so many of us cave in. We give in to suicidal thoughts. We'll take our own life because the weight of the world can get on your back and it can do some crazy things to you. Um, but just that message to not lose my mind and to stay focused and be in expectation that God is going to bring me out of it, it was all I needed. I got through that moment, and he continued to elevate me so much after that, because I stayed, I kept my hand in his hand, and I knew that he was going to bring me out. So that's part one of my favorite episode. I've got another part that I'm going to share with you on what happened after he brought me out, how that all transpired to get me to the point where I'm here today sharing with you. And I'll share that on a later episode. But for those of you that are going through a hard time and you feel like your back is against the wall, remember, don't lose your mind. In all of this, do not lose your mind. You're going to need it when God restores you. Do not focus on what's going on in anybody else's life, how good things appear to be going for other people, and it feels like they're not going well for you at all. Don't be dismayed at the fact that you're going through a moment and everybody else may be going through their peak season. Just stay locked in to the promises that you're going to be restored. Don't give up that easy, because it takes a lot of pressure to make a diamond. and you're just going through some pressure, it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be downright uncomfortable. Trust me, I know. But all you have to do is hold on. And if you can't think about anybody that you can hold on to, send me a message. Put it in the comments of this chat. I'll personally reach out to you and encourage you. Just know that it's not over until God says it's over. Be blessed.